I recognized my mother's sleeve before I recognized the dress. It was lying in a wicker scrap basket beside the fitting platform, half buried under tissue paper and a strip of ivory lining. The lace was yellowed at the cuff in the same faint crescent where Mom used to rest her wrist on the kitchen table. I had spent 3 Saturdays cleaning around that stain with a cotton swab, because removing it completely felt too much like erasing her. Now the sleeve had been cut off at the shoulder. I stopped inside the door of Bell & Finch Alterations with one hand still wrapped around the brass handle. Paige stood on the fitting platform wearing my mother's wedding dress. The original high neckline had been opened into a deep curve. Pins glittered down both sides of her waist. The skirt, which had reached the floor when I tried it on, ended in a jagged line above her ankles while a seamstress knelt in front of her with a pair of silver shears. Miles stood near the mirror with his mother, Diane, and 2 women I recognized from Paige's engagement party. One of them was holding up her phone. A pale blue garment bag hung from a hook behind them with the label of a bridal shop I had never visited. For several seconds nobody noticed me. Then the bell above the door finished chiming. Miles turned. His expression did not look guilty. It looked inconvenienced, as if I had arrived before he had finished arranging the room. "Aaron," he said, "you weren't supposed to be here until 2. It was 1:43. Paige looked at him, then at me. The seamstress lowered the scissors but did not stand. "What are you wearing?" I asked. My voice sounded small enough that I glanced behind me, almost expecting to find the person who had spoken. Miles crossed the room. "This got complicated, but it's handled. You're still getting the wedding, Aaron. Paige only needed the dress." Paige touched the new neckline with 2 fingers. "Miles said you'd already chosen the new one. He shifted so he was partly between us. And you have. I picked it up this morning." He pointed to the blue garment bag as though that explained why my mother's sleeve was in a basket. Diane said, "The replacement is much more flattering. Modern but not trendy. You're going to love it once you see it." I took out my phone. The first photograph was a blur of cream fabric and ceiling lights because my hand would not hold still. I braced my wrist against the doorframe and tried again. This time I got Paige on the platform, the cut sleeve in the basket, the replacement dress behind Miles, and a paper clipped to the seamstress's work table. Across the top in block letters it read Paige Sutton, Permanent Alterations. "Please put the scissors down," I said. "That dress is mine." The seamstress placed them on the floor beside her and stood. She was perhaps 60, with a tape measure around her neck and a pin cushion strapped to her wrist. "Mr. Carter represented that it was a gift from the bride," she said carefully. "We have a signed authorization." "He isn't the bride." Miles sighed. "Can we not make a scene in front of everybody?" The woman with the phone finally lowered it. I walked to the work table. The form had Miles's signature beneath a typed note. "Gift from bride. Permanent alterations approved." It listed shortening the hem, removing the sleeves, reshaping the neckline, and taking out the embroidered initials inside the waistband. "M.W. stitched by my grandmother in blue thread in 1992. Where are the initials?" I asked. The seamstress frowned. "It was removed during the preliminary work. I'll verify where it was placed." "Get out of the dress," I told Paige. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm pinned into it." "Then let her unpin you." "Aaron," Miles said, sharpening my name into a warning. "Paige's gown was destroyed when that pipe burst at her studio. Her wedding is in 8 weeks. This dress was sitting in a preservation box, and you weren't even sure you wanted to wear it." I stared at him. "Our wedding is in 6 days. Which is why I bought you another dress. You bought me another dress so you could give mine away." I solved 2 problems. Behind him, one of Paige's friends looked down at the floor. The other tucked her phone into her purse. I stepped closer to the platform. Paige had been in my apartment when Aunt Colleen and I opened the preservation box. She had watched me unfold the tissue paper and find Mom's note pinned inside the left sleeve. "Pin from the inside or the silk will pucker." She had cried with me. Later, she had posted a picture of the 3 of us holding the dress and written, "Some things carry all the women who came before us." Now she was wearing it with one bare shoulder while a row of pins pulled the waist against her body. "Take it off," I said. "I didn't steal it." Her cheeks had gone pink, but her chin stayed lifted. "Miles brought it to me." He said you wanted something simpler. And when did he tell you that? She glanced at him. It was enough. You knew, I said. I knew you were attached to it. I didn't know he hadn't talked to you. The form says permanent gift. That's shop language. It's regular language, Paige. She looked away toward the mirror. Something hot moved through me then, faster than thought. You're standing there in a dead woman's stolen skin. Paige's mouth opened. The sentence disgusted me as soon as it left me. It was cruel and Mom would have hated it. But I could not call it back, and Paige still did not step down. Miles moved in front of her. That's enough. She had no reason to think I was lying. He was protecting her from embarrassment while my mother's sleeve lay at his feet. I reached into my tote and pulled out the folder I had brought, because I thought this appointment was about checking my veil. Inside were the estate inventory, the preservation receipt in my name, and a photograph of Mom wearing the dress outside St. Anne's. I put all three on the work table. May Walsh's estate transferred the dress to Aaron Walsh, I said to the seamstress. There is no gift from me. There is no permission from me. Stop the work and document its condition. The seamstress read the first page. Her face tightened. Miss Sutton, I need you to step out of the gown. Paige looked at Miles again. This time he had nothing ready. It took 12 minutes to remove the pins without tearing the open seams. I stood beside the work table while Paige changed behind a curtain. The shop's garment steamer clicked on and off. Someone's timer beeped twice in the back room before a younger employee hurried past us to silence it. Miles tried 3 versions of the same explanation. First, it had only been a loan. Then, Paige had understood she could keep it because I had a better dress. Finally, he said we had all been under pressure and he had made an executive decision. Miles supervised facilities scheduling for a logistics company. He used that phrase at work, never with me. Which one did you write on the form? I asked. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You're focusing on wording. You signed away something you don't own. I was trying to prevent 2 weddings from falling apart. You used mine to save hers. Diane came beside me, lowering her voice as though tact were the only thing missing. Honey, I understand why seeing it this way is upsetting, but the damage is done. Paige can use it, and you can wear the beautiful dress Miles bought. Nobody has to lose anything else. I looked at her. I already lost it. She frowned because to her the dress was still in the room. Paige emerged in leggings and a long cardigan. The altered dress was draped over both arms. For one irrational moment I wanted her to trip. Then I hated myself for that too. The seamstress laid the gown on a clean table and began placing the cut pieces around it. 2 sleeves. A long strip from the hem. A wedge of silk from the neckline. Mom's initials were not among them. Mom had been gone 4 years when I tried on the dress after we finished restoring it. Miles had stood behind me in Aunt Colleen's guest room and pressed his mouth to my hair. Your mom will be right there with you, he had said. He had sounded sincere. That was the memory that hurt most, not because it had been false then, but because I believed he had meant it and had still become the man standing here. The seamstress showed me a second authorization sheet. We can release the gown to you today if you sign that you're taking it against our recommendation. The cut edges need support before transport. Can you pack it safely? Yes. I'll place each piece separately. Miles reached for my elbow. Don't take it yet. Let them finish something useful. They can make it wearable for Paige, and then we'll send it to a restorer. I pulled away. You still think she's wearing it? He lowered his voice. I think once you calm down, you won't want all this damage to be for nothing. Paige was close enough to hear. She looked at him as if that sentence had made her less certain of her place in his plan. I took off my engagement ring. I did not throw it or place it dramatically in his hand. I slipped it into the zippered pocket inside my purse because my fingers were shaking, and I was afraid I would drop it through a floor vent. You are not canceling on 138 people over fabric, Miles said. I'm not canceling over fabric. Then what exactly are you doing? I called the venue. While the phone rang, Diane whispered, Aaron, please. Think about your father. Think about what people will say. The event coordinator answered on the 4th ring. I knew her voice immediately. For 11 months, she and I had discussed everything from chair spacing to whether the West Terrace would be too cold after sunset. Hi, Talia. I said. This is Aaron Walsh. I need the cancellation clause. Today. Miles walked out onto the sidewalk. Through the front window I saw him take out his phone. Perhaps he was calling my father. Perhaps he thought an older man could return me to reasonable behavior. The seamstress wrapped the gown in unbleached tissue. Paige left with her friends without speaking to me. Diane followed, but not before telling the seamstress that the entire situation had been a family misunderstanding. When the shop was finally quiet, I signed the condition report. The damage list took half a page. The gown fit inside a plain shop bag only after the skirt was folded twice. I made it as far as the restroom before I threw up. Afterward I sat on the closed toilet and pressed a wet paper towel to my mouth. The garment bag leaned against the door. It smelled like Paige's perfume, sweet and peppery. Instead of the cedar and camphor I remembered from the preservation box. That was when I cried. Not in front of Miles. Not while Paige was wearing it. I cried in a narrow restroom beneath a crooked framed print of Paris while somebody on the other side of the wall ran an industrial iron over a seam. Nora arrived 20 minutes later. I had sent her one photograph and the words, "Can you come?" She did not ask for the rest before leaving work. She carried the dress to her car while I held the plastic box of cut pieces against my chest. Once we were inside, she locked the doors and turned off the radio. "Do you want me to drive you home?" she asked. "No. My place." I nodded. She started the car then stopped. "One question. If there were no guests, no deposits, and nobody's mother calling you, would you still marry him on Saturday?" I watched a delivery truck block the crosswalk ahead of us. "No," I said. Nora put the car in gear. "Okay." At her kitchen table, I opened my laptop and the wedding spreadsheet I had once color-coded for pleasure. The venue contract allowed cancellation by either primary signatory. I was one. The deposit was non-refundable within 30 days, along with the catering minimum and equipment fees already committed. Talia spoke gently but did not pretend there was a loophole. Canceling the ceremony and attached reception would cost me roughly $9,700 after the small refundable balances were returned. For about a minute I stared at that number. It was almost 4 months of my take-home pay after rent and insurance. It was more than I had ever spent on anything that did not have wheels or a mortgage attached. Miles called 7 times. I let each call stop on its own. My father called next. I answered because ignoring him would only bring him to Nora's door. "Miles says there was a disagreement about the dress," he began. Miles gave Mom's dress to Paige and had it cut apart. There was a pause. "He said he bought you another one." "I know. Are you safe?" The question nearly undid me. "Yes." "Then tell me what you need." "I need you not to call the venue." "He may ask you to." Dad exhaled slowly. "I won't." Julia, my cousin and one of my bridesmaids, texted that maybe I should sleep on it. Diane left a voicemail about out-of-town relatives and embarrassment. Paige sent nothing. At 4:18 I canceled the venue and reception. At 4:41, I called Reverend Thomas and told him there would be no ceremony. At 5:03, I canceled the county appointment to complete the marriage license paperwork. The hotel could not release our room block until the next morning, but I told them to start the process. I shut down the gift registry and changed the wedding website. The cheerful photograph of Miles and me beneath an elm tree disappeared. So did the countdown that had read 6 days to go. In its place I wrote, "The ceremony will not take place. We are sorry for the disruption and grateful for your understanding. Please direct logistical questions to the venue or hotel." I did not explain the dress. I did not publish the photographs. I did not ask anyone to choose a side. My hand hovered over the email to all 138 guests for so long that the screen dimmed. Nora reached past me and tapped the trackpad to wake it. She did not press send. "You can wait 10 minutes, she said. "If I wait 10 minutes, I'll wait until morning." "Maybe. And if I wait until morning, he'll be at my door with a new dress and a plan for making this sound survivable." She sat back. "Probably." I pressed send. The replies began before the progress bar finished. Some people asked if we were all right. Some wanted to know whether their hotel rooms were canceled automatically. One of Miles's uncles replied to the entire guest list with a question mark. At 7:30, Miles appeared outside Nora's building. He buzzed her apartment until she unplugged the intercom. Then he stood on the sidewalk and called me. I answered once. Reverse it, he said. No hello. Talia says the date hasn't been released yet. Tell her you acted under stress. I acted because you gave away my dress. I made a bad call. I can admit that. But you don't destroy an entire wedding because of one bad call. You arranged a replacement. You planned to show it to me Saturday morning. Because I knew you'd panic if I told you too early. The bluntness of it made me grip the phone harder. You thought if the guests were already there, I'd have to wear it. I thought you would see the bigger picture. You mean I would be trapped by the bigger audience? He made a frustrated sound. This is what you do. You take one sentence and turn it into a verdict. Go home, Miles. It's our home. It wasn't. We had kept separate apartments until the wedding because his lease ended 2 weeks afterward. The plan had been for him to move into mine after our honeymoon. Go to your apartment, I said, and ended the call. At 11:47 that night, an email arrived from the venue. Event status. Cancelled. The date would be released to the waiting list in the morning. The final accounting would follow within 5 business days. I read it twice, then put my laptop on the floor. Miles sent one last text. I'll fix this tomorrow. You're exhausted. Before I could decide whether to answer, a second message appeared. Uncle Rob just called me. Do you understand what you've done? I looked across Nora's living room at the garment bag laid flat on her dining table. Through a gap in the zipper, I could see the raw edge where Mom's left sleeve had been. Yes, I thought. I finally did. Miles came to Nora's apartment at 8 the next morning carrying the replacement dress over one shoulder. He had also brought coffee from the place near my clinic, including the cinnamon I usually sprinkled over the foam. The familiarity of it was almost worse than if he had arrived shouting. Nora opened the building door but kept the chain across her apartment door. Aaron asked you to leave, she said. Aaron asked me to go home last night. It's morning. I was standing in the hallway behind her, still wearing the t-shirt I had slept in. Miles saw me and lifted the coffee tray slightly. Can we talk without an audience? Nora lives here. You know what I mean. He unzipped the blue garment bag enough to show white satin and a beaded bodice. Look at it before you decide you hate it, he said. The salon manager said it can be altered by Friday. We can start over. I already canceled the wedding. Talia hasn't filled the date yet. I called at 7. Why are you calling my venue? Our venue. I was the primary signatory. She isn't reversing the cancellation without me. He blinked. Apparently he had expected Talia's refusal to be temporary, something he could correct once normal business hours began. Then call her, he said. I'll cover the penalty for whatever paperwork has to be redone. It isn't paperwork. It's a reservation. It was our marriage. His jaw tightened. Exactly. It was our marriage until you canceled it in an afternoon. I almost laughed. The sentence was so close to the truth and so carefully aimed away from him. Nora closed the door. For 10 minutes Miles knocked, first with his knuckles and then with the side of his fist. When he stopped, he left the coffee and the dress hanging from the doorknob. Nora waited until his car pulled away before bringing them inside. What do you want to do with this? She asked, holding the replacement gown as though it might leak. Return it if the receipt is in there. It was. He had spent $2,850 on a dress in my size, using his own credit card, 3 days before I walked into the alteration shop. 3 days. He had not made a panicked purchase after Paige's fitting. He had planned the fitting around the purchase. I called the salon. Because I was neither the buyer nor the cardholder, they would not accept a return from me. I left the dress zipped in its bag and asked Miles by text to collect it from Nora's lobby. His answer came immediately. Keep it. You need a dress. I blocked his number for the rest of the morning. By lunch, his version of the story had reached both families. Diane called it a borrowing misunderstanding in the Carter family group chat. She wrote that Paige had suffered an emergency, Miles had tried to help, and I had reacted out of grief before allowing anyone to explain. Someone forwarded the message to my father, who forwarded it to me with no comment. Paige posted a cropped photograph from the fitting. The image showed her from the waist up, so none of the cut hem or discarded sleeve was visible. Her caption read, When a lifelong friend saves your wedding after disaster. Forever grateful. She disabled comments within an hour, but not before 2 people asked why she was wearing my mother's dress. I did not respond online. Instead, I called 3 textile conservators. The first did not work with 20th century bridal silk. The second had a 9-month waiting list. The third, Rose Alvarez, asked me to email photographs and called back before her receptionist had finished sending the intake form. "Do not hang it," she said. "Do not press anything. Keep every thread and fragment they gave you. Can you bring it tomorrow morning?" Her studio occupied the 2nd floor of an old brick building above a frame shop. Nora drove because I still did not trust myself to transport the dress without checking it at every stoplight. Rose wore magnifying glasses on a cord around her neck. She washed her hands, spread a cotton sheet over a wide table, and opened Mom's garment bag one section at a time. She did not say how beautiful the dress had been. She did not tell me she could work miracles. She examined the cut shoulder under a lamp, measured the missing length from the skirt, and photographed the opened waistband where the initials had been. "The sleeve can be supported and reattached for display," she said. "The skirt can be reconstructed using the removed panel, though the join will remain visible on close inspection. The neckline is more difficult because material was cut away. I can preserve the remaining structure and reduce further stress." "Could I wear it?" Rose looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You could, with substantial intervention. But wearing it would place tension on already compromised silk. If your priority is preserving what belonged to your mother, I would advise stabilization rather than making it perform as a wedding gown again." I stared at the empty place where the initials had been. "Can you make it look the way it did?" "We can stabilize it," she said. "We cannot make nothing happen." I nodded as if she had given me ordinary information. Then I sat down on a rolling stool and cried so hard I had to bend forward to breathe. Rose quietly moved the cup holding her tools away from my elbow. Nora put one hand between my shoulder blades. Neither of them told me to stop. On the drive back, I asked Nora whether I had made a mistake. About the conservator? About all of it. Canceling before I slept. Losing the money. Emailing everybody. She drove another block before answering. "Do you want to marry him?" "That's not what I asked. It's the question underneath all the other ones." I turned toward the passenger window. "I loved him yesterday morning." "You probably still love him." "That doesn't help." "No, it doesn't." I spent the afternoon at my apartment because I had clean clothes there, and because refusing to enter my own home felt like another thing Miles had taken. He still had a key for watering my plants and bringing in packages. I had not changed the lock. He had not been living there, and I wanted his key returned in writing before I involved the building manager. There were wedding boxes everywhere. Programs stacked beside the sofa. Welcome bags under the dining table. A seating chart propped against the wall with 138 names arranged around a life that no longer existed. I sat on the floor and began sorting what could be returned. At 3, Julia arrived with the bridesmaid emergency kit she had assembled. She left it by the door and kept rubbing the strap of her purse. "I'm sorry," she said. "I honestly thought Miles had talked to you." "About what?" She did not answer quickly enough. "Julia. Paige sent a picture 2 days ago. Just to the bridesmaids. She said there had been a dress emergency and Miles had saved everything." My hands went still on a box of folded napkins. "You saw her in Mom's dress 2 days ago?" "It was cropped. I couldn't tell what they had changed." "Did you ask me?" "I almost did. Then Megan said Miles wanted the new dress to be a surprise. And I thought maybe there was some plan I wasn't included in." "You were my bridesmaid." "I know. You were included enough to know before I did." Her eyes filled. "I didn't want to ruin your wedding if I was wrong." There it was again. My wedding used as the reason no one could tell me what was being done to it. Julia had been my emergency contact with the hotel, and the person authorized to collect several refundable items. I opened the spreadsheet and changed those duties to Nora. "Are you punishing me?" she asked. "I'm giving the work to someone who tells me when something is wrong." She flinched. I wanted to soften it. I also wanted, with a childish fury, to make her feel one small part of what her silence had cost me. "I'm sorry," I said, though I was not sure which part one meant. "I can't rely on you for this." She left the kit and went home. At 5:12, the venue emailed to say our date had been accepted by another couple from the waiting list. I read the message standing at my kitchen counter. The wedding was not merely canceled now. The space had begun belonging to somebody else. I called the hotel and confirmed that the hospitality desk and shuttle service were canceled. Guests could keep their rooms at the group rate if they chose, but there would be no welcome packets waiting for them. Reverend Thomas released our ceremony time. My father texted to say Miles had asked him to call Talia and he had refused. Then Megan called. She was Miles's younger sister, and had spent most of the previous day posting neutral messages about giving us privacy. Her voice sounded scraped raw. "I need to send you something," she said. "And I need you to know I should have sent it last night." "What is it?" "The Carter chat. There's a smaller one without you. Mom uses it for family logistics." My phone began receiving screenshots before she finished speaking. The first was dated 4 days before the fitting. Miles. "Once Erin sees the designer dress on Saturday morning, she'll be relieved. Diane. And if she isn't?" Miles. "She won't cancel with 138 people already there." I sat down. There were more. Miles had asked Megan to bring the replacement dress to my hotel room on the wedding morning. Megan had refused because she thought he was joking. Diane had volunteered to do it instead. Julia had not been in that chat, but Megan had told the bridesmaids there was a surprise and not to ask questions. Then Megan sent 2 screenshots from messages Paige had forwarded to her that morning. "Miles, keep the dress. After we're married, she'll stop treating every object like a shrine. Paige, she'll hate me for a week. Miles, she'll get over it. She always does." I read the last line until the letters stopped looking like words. "Erin," Megan said. "I'm here. He told us you had basically agreed. He said you got sentimental whenever decisions became final, so he was helping you get past it." Mom believed him. "I believed enough of it not to call you." "Why is Paige sending you his messages?" "Because he's telling everyone she misunderstood him. She wants proof that he promised she could keep the dress. Even their alliance was held together by different lies." "Send everything," I said. "I will." Megan swallowed audibly. "I'm sorry." The screenshots did not reveal an affair. In some ways, what they showed was more familiar and harder to dismiss. Miles liked Paige's emergencies. He liked being the person who found a vendor, replaced a key, negotiated a lease, rescued a wedding dress. Paige rewarded him by looking at him, as if he had pulled her from a burning building. At 35, after 11 years as an occupational therapist, I had made competence automatic. With me, it ran in the other direction. I remembered his dental appointments and reviewed the health plan options. I carried travel confirmations because he never downloaded them. He called me his steady place. I had thought that was love. In the screenshots, it looked more like infrastructure. Paige got the dramatic rescue. I got the bill, the explanation, and the expectation that I would remain standing. Nora came over after work and found me sitting among the welcome bags. "Tell me not to call Talia," I said. "The date is gone." "I know. Tell me I shouldn't ask if the other couple has signed yet." She read the screenshots on my phone, then crouched across from me. "Marrying him would not restore the dress," she said. "It would not recover the deposit. It would only teach him that his timing worked." I closed my eyes. I hate that I still want him to come in and say one thing that makes this make sense. What thing? I don't know. Then he probably doesn't either. That night Luke Bennett emailed me. He had seen Paige's post, then heard from one of her friends that I had objected at the fitting. He asked one question. Had Paige known the dress was mine? I did not write an account of her character. I sent him the alteration form and the 2 photographs from the shop. I added, "She was present when I inherited and restored it. I did not consent to a gift or alterations." Luke replied 20 minutes later. "Thank you. I'm sorry to ask while you're dealing with your own situation. I've paused our wedding plans until Paige and I can talk honestly." I felt no triumph. His message only widened the damage. Paige called Miles immediately. I knew because he came to my apartment while still arguing with her through his car's speakerphone. I heard them in the parking lot below my open window. "Tell Luke it was a misunderstanding," Miles said. "Then admit you lied to me," Paige snapped. "You said she gave it to me." I said she was getting another dress. You said I could keep it. That was before she lost her mind. I closed the window. 5 minutes later he knocked. This time I opened the door but stood in the gap. He looked tired. There were gray shadows beneath his eyes, and part of me responded to that before I could stop it. 5 years of knowing his face did not disappear because I had learned something ugly about him. I'll cut Paige off, he said. Completely. I'll pay Rose or whoever you choose to repair the dress. We can do a private ceremony later, just us and your dad. You can wear anything you want. You told her I treat mom's things like a shrine. He looked down the hallway. I was frustrated. You told her I always get over it. Because you usually don't hold grudges. You planned to wait until Saturday morning, because you knew I wouldn't want to humiliate myself in front of the guests. I knew once the day started, you'd remember what mattered. You still think the problem is that the day stopped. His face tightened. We don't have to lose the whole wedding over this. There is no wedding to lose. Then the relationship. Fine. We don't have to lose us. His certainty finally slipped. He glanced past me at the seating chart still leaning against the wall. I made a terrible decision, he said. I'm trying to fix it. You're trying to get the result you planned. I'm trying to keep my fiancé. You should have asked her. I shut the door. The next morning Nora drove me back to Rose's studio to deliver the remaining paperwork. On the way home we passed the venue. The white marquee at the road had been changed. Welcome Laura and Ben. I asked Nora to pull over. I sat with both hands pressed between my knees, watching a florist's van turn into the driveway that should have led to my rehearsal dinner. My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was Paige. Miles has until tonight to tell everyone what he did, or I'm releasing all of our messages. I turned the phone face down. For 6 days, other people had made plans around what they assumed I would tolerate. I was done helping any of them manage the story. Paige did not release the messages that night. Instead, Bell and Finch called me the next morning and asked whether I wanted copies of the complete intake record. Their insurance company had instructed them to preserve every email, authorization, and security camera timestamp connected to the dress. I said yes. The packet arrived as a password-protected file. Nora sat beside me at my dining table while I opened it, though neither of us spoke for the first several pages. There was the original appointment request from Miles, sent 10 days before I found them at the shop. My fiancé is gifting a vintage family gown to a close friend after choosing a new dress for herself. The friend needs permanent alterations on a short timeline. The seamstress had replied that the owner should attend the first fitting or provide written consent. Miles had sent the authorization bearing only his own signature. When the shop questioned it, he wrote, "Erin is overwhelmed with wedding details and asked me to handle this. I have authority to release it on her behalf." 2 days later, Paige emailed photographs of the dress on a hanger and asked whether the embroidered initials could be removed. The shop manager answered that initials were often retained in heirloom gowns, and suggested incorporating them into the new lining. Miles replied, "Please remove them entirely. Paige shouldn't look like she borrowed it." I read that sentence 3 times. The camera log showed him entering the shop with the dress at 4:22 on Monday afternoon. He had left work early. At 4:49, he walked out carrying the empty preservation box. He had placed it in the trunk of his car, driven to my apartment, and later eaten dinner with me while I complained about table assignments. That night he had asked if I was nervous about the wedding. I had said, "Only about things I can't control." He had kissed my forehead and told me that was why I had him. The intake packet did not create a new betrayal. It removed every place he had tried to hide the old one. At the bottom of the file was an audio attachment. The shop manager had saved a voicemail page left after being told I disputed the authorization. Most of it concerned her deposit. Then near the end, Paige's voice grew sharper. "Miles said Erin is safe. She gets mad but she doesn't leave. I don't understand why your shop is suddenly acting like I did something criminal." Safe. I had spent 5 years thinking it meant trusted, loved, known. To them, it meant available for damage. Nora closed the laptop. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked. "Yes." So she stayed while I called the building manager and arranged to have the lock rekeyed. I emailed Miles a time to return my apartment key and collect the few belongings he kept there. I attached an inventory, 2 jackets, running shoes, a shaving kit, 3 books, and the espresso machine he had bought. He replied that changing the lock was unnecessary and hostile. I did it anyway. Paige asked to meet that afternoon. I almost refused. Then she said she had several buttons the seamstress had given her for the redesign, the cut piece bearing Mom's initials, and Mom's old garment bag. We met at a coffee shop near Rose's studio. I chose a table by the window and asked Nora to wait in her car across the street. Paige arrived without makeup, wearing a sweatshirt and jeans. I noticed the indentation where her engagement ring had been before I could stop myself from looking. She set a paper shopping bag on the table. Inside were 6 covered buttons, the embroidered rectangle, and Mom's old muslin garment bag, which I had thought was lost during cleaning. Paige had folded it into a square. Masking tape near the zipper read in "Do not press lace." "Luke has the ring," she said. I had not asked. "He hasn't ended it. He says he needs space." "That's between you and Luke." "I know. I'm just telling you I didn't get away with this." The phrase made me look at her. "Is that what you came to explain?" "No," she wrapped both hands around a cup she had not tasted. "I came because Miles keeps saying we both misunderstood him, and that isn't true." She told me he had called after the pipe burst at her interior staging studio. Water had ruined 3 sample gowns beneath the ceiling, including one she had bought from a client shoot. She had been crying. Miles said he knew where he could get a vintage dress that would suit her better. "At first, he told me you had decided not to wear it," she said. I believed that part because he knew all the details. He had the box. He knew about the new dress. "When did you know I hadn't agreed?" Paige looked toward the window. "Before the appointment." "How long before?" 2 days. "How?" "I asked why you hadn't texted me. He said you were being sentimental and he was handling it." I waited. "I knew that wasn't the same as permission," she said. "No. I should have stopped." "Yes." Her mouth tightened. "Part of me liked that he chose my problem over your feelings." "That sounds horrible." "It is horrible." She nodded once, accepting it. "Nothing happened between us," she said. "Not physically." I didn't ask. "Luke did." "Then answer Luke." Paige looked down at the bag. "I'm sorry about your mother's dress." The apology did not make me feel lighter. It did not make me angrier either. It sat between us, accurate and insufficient. "Remove the fitting photo," I said. "And any other picture of you wearing it." "I already did." "Ask your friends to delete theirs too." "I will." I put the buttons and embroidered initials into my purse, unfolded the old garment bag and left. I did not forgive her. I also did not need her to envy me, lose Luke, or admit that I had been the better woman. I needed the pieces that belonged with the dress. That was all she could return. By evening, Paige had sent a message to both families stating that I had never consented and Miles had misrepresented the dress as a gift. She did not release their private conversations. She did not need to. Diane texted me 6 words. I believed him. "I should have asked you." I read it and put my phone away. An apology could be true without restoring access to me. Megan stopped mediating for her brother. Julia mailed back the emergency contact folder with a handwritten note that said she understood why I could not rely on her. I wrote thank you on a card and sent it back. We did not return to the way we had been. The rest of the week was filled with small humiliations. I returned unopened favors while a cashier counted each box. I called the bakery and learned the bottom 2 tiers of the cake had already been baked, so I paid the balance and asked them to donate what they could. I removed 2 weeks of planned leave from the clinic calendar, then added 3 days back after my supervisor told me kindly that coming to work on Monday was not a test of character. Packages arrived from guests who had ordered before the registry closed. Nora helped me match each one to a return label. My father drove the welcome bags to a shelter that could use the toiletries and snacks. There was no clean moment when wedding planning ended. It came apart in invoices, tracking numbers, and calls from people who began with, "I don't want to pry, but..." Miles returned my key on Thursday. He left it in an envelope with the doorman but took only his shaving kit and running shoes. He said he would collect the rest after we talked. I packed all of it anyway and had the building manager supervise the pickup. On Friday morning, Rose called to say she had received the final fragments and could begin work whenever I was ready to choose a treatment plan. There are 2 options? I asked. More than 2, she said. But the central choice is whether we prioritize making it wearable or preserving the original material with minimal intervention. I thought about standing in Mom's dress at the front of a room. For years, that image had been so clear that I treated it like a memory instead of a hope. Now when I pictured the dress, I saw Paige on the platform and the scissors on the floor. Can I come in tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow was supposed to be my wedding day. Aunt Colleen met me at Rose's studio at 11. She had helped restore the dress with me over 14 weekends, but she had not seen it since the fitting. When Rose opened the tissue, Colleen pressed her lips together and touched the back of a chair. Your mother would swear for 10 straight minutes, she said. I laughed, then covered my face because the laugh turned into a sob. Colleen came around the table and held me. And then she'd tell you it was a dress, sweetheart. A precious dress, but not her. I know. Knowing can take a while to reach the rest of you. Rose showed us how she could support the severed sleeves over dyed silk net and align the cut skirt panel without disguising the new seams. The neckline would remain altered because restoring its old height would require inserting too much replacement fabric. She could return Mom's initials to the waistband and place a dated treatment record beside them so no future person would mistake reconstruction for original work. The form offered 2 descriptions of service: bridal restoration, stabilization and preservation. I checked the second box. At 4 o'clock, the hour printed on our invitations, I sat at Nora's kitchen table with my phone turned off. She made grilled cheese sandwiches. Neither of us ate much. Through the open window came the sound of a lawn mower, a dog barking, and somebody dragging a recycling bin down the alley. The day had the nerve to be ordinary. I watched the oven clock change from 3:59 to 4 o'clock. In another version of that minute, the string quartet would have begun the processional. Dad would have offered me his arm. Miles would have been waiting beneath the arbor, believing the replacement gown had worked because I had appeared in it. At 4:03 I started crying. At 4:10 I wiped my face, took the engagement ring from my purse, and placed it in the padded envelope Nora had prepared. A courier was waiting downstairs. I signed the pickup confirmation and watched him carry it away. There had been no ceremony. There was no marriage license. The hour passed without me becoming Miles's wife. He came to my apartment shortly after 8 that evening. I saw him through the new peephole, standing beside the replacement gown in its blue bag. He held the returned ring box in one hand. I opened the door but kept 1 foot behind it. I'm not coming in, he said. No. He looked past me anyway. Paige blocked me. Luke thinks I've been using their relationship to make myself important. Megan won't answer. My mother says I made her defend a lie. I said nothing. I know none of that is your problem. Okay. He set the garment bag against the hallway wall. I brought this because I don't know what else to do with it. Return it. The window closed. Then donate it. His eyes filled, but he blinked the tears back. I liked that Paige needed me. It was the first honest thing he had said all week without being cornered by a document. When she called, everything was urgent, he continued. I could make a call, move something, pay for something, and she acted like I was the only person who could save her. With you, I always felt like you already had it handled. So you created a problem I couldn't handle. I didn't think of it that way. You didn't think of me at all. He rubbed both hands over his face. I thought you'd be angry. I didn't think you'd be gone. That was the part you counted on. He nodded. This time he did not argue. I'll go to therapy, he said. Not once. I'll do the work. I'll pay every dollar for the conservation. I'll never speak to Paige again. We can wait a year, 2 years, whatever you need, and get engaged again. No guests. No pressure. You choose every part. For half a second, my mind supplied the easier scene. Letting him inside, sitting on the sofa, allowing the familiar rhythm of his voice to shrink the week into something we had survived. Then I remembered Mom's initials in Paige's shopping bag. I remembered him writing that Paige should not look as though she had borrowed the dress. He had not lost control for one afternoon. He had used my trust as permission and my love as insurance. Therapy is a good idea, I said. You should do it. We could do it together. No. He stared at me. There is no ceremony to reschedule, Miles. I'm not asking about a ceremony. I'm asking about us. The answer is still no. He looked down at the ring box. 5 years, Aaron. I know how long it was. And you can just close the door? No. There's no just in any of this. That seemed to reach him more deeply than anger had. His shoulders dropped. He picked up the blue garment bag and stepped back. I am sorry, he said. I believe you're sorry now. It was not forgiveness. It was not an invitation. It was simply the last true thing I could give him. I closed the door. 6 months later, Rose called to say the preservation work was complete. The dress did not look new. She had reattached the sleeves over support netting, but a fine line remained at each shoulder. The skirt fell to its original length again, with a narrow join visible in the light. The neckline stayed lower than Mom had worn it. Inside the waistband, MW appeared in blue thread beside a small fabric label recording the date and nature of the repair. Rose had placed the dress in an archival box with the treatment report, the photographs taken before and after, and a separate envelope containing threads too small to reuse. Nothing had been thrown away. Nothing had been passed off as untouched. I stored the box on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. My life had not transformed into a reward for leaving Miles. I still worked at the same clinic. I still lived in the same apartment. Some friends stayed close, some drifted toward the version of events that made them least uncomfortable, and Julia and I exchanged birthday texts without pretending we trusted each other as we once had. Miles mailed one letter after completing 3 months of therapy. I read it once and filed it with the canceled contracts. I did not answer. On a rainy Tuesday in March, I was getting ready for work when a button came loose on my Navy clinic coat. I found Mom's pearl-handled needle box in the back of the hall drawer. She had used it for hems, loose cuffs, and the stuffed rabbit I dragged through kindergarten. Inside were needles arranged by size, a paper packet of pins, and spools wound with colors she bought because they were close enough. I chose navy thread, sat beneath the kitchen light, and sewed the button back on. My stitches were uneven, so I cut them out and did it again. The second time the button held. I put on the coat, took my keys from the bowl by the door and went to work.